2025 couldn't have started any better for tennis fans. The first Grand Slam of the new season kicked off with a bang. Beautiful tennis and incredible shot making.
Oh, get out of here! Awesome, unbelievable!
Next-gen takeovers.
Simply phenomenal, Fonseca. Learn a team.
A truckload of 5-set thrillers. And of course, endless drama.
Match point, a hammered backhand. And she's giving it to the crowd too.
Week 1 of the Australian Open had all the fireworks, and none of us minded losing sleep just to keep up with the action. Here's everything that went down in tennis last week. Week 1 of the Australian Open came with yet another reality check for the lost gen, the generation of players that got suppressed by the big three before getting passed by the next gen. Tsitsipas was the first one to get the memo, and I can't say I was totally surprised. After being kicked out of the top 10 last year, Tsitsipas got that much-needed off-season reset to deal with the burnout he was experiencing, and having made the semis or better 4 times at the AO, you would have expected him to find a way to handle Alex Mikkelson's dangerously flat backhands. But that didn't quite happen. Instead, Tsitsipas got pummeled with down-the-line winners oh so frequently. Mikkelson's tactical genius prevented Tsitsipas from playing his usual game and being aggressive with the inside-out forehand. The match was over in 4 sets, and just like that, Steph had been served his earliest loss at the AO since 2018. With a 2-0 head-to-head against Tsitsipas, it's beginning to look like Mikkelsen will be a matchup problem for the Greek. I'll tell you this much, Mikkelsen is somewhat underrated. Meanwhile, at about the same time, Casper Ruud had just survived a 5-set battle against Jaume Munar in the first round, but he wouldn't be so lucky in the second because Jakub Menchik was in his element.
Wow.
After sharing the spoils in the first 2 sets, Menchik started to separate himself from Ruud, showing incredible quality and resolve. Menchik took care of business in 4 sets to send Casper packing.
Jakub Menchik.
And if you still haven't hopped on the Menchik bandwagon yet, you're at risk of being left behind because the kid is legit. The lost gen guys continue to get their butts kicked, with Andrei Rublev falling to Fonseca. If you want to know more about Fonseca, check out the deep dive I just made about him, where we break down every part of his game and explain why he's a different talent from what we're normally used to. Elsewhere, Medvedev had to fight tooth and nail against Thai wildcard Kasadit Samre. Medvedev's serve caught fire for a huge chunk of the match as he hit Samre with 24 aces and a couple more service winners. However, Samre came to play tennis and blitzed Medi to a 2-1 lead.
He's done it.
After throwing some tantrums, Medvedev responded in kind with a breadstick in the 4th set before finishing with a flourish in the 5th set. It really did feel bizarre seeing last year's Australian Open finalist being pushed to the limit by a guy outside the top 400. If only we knew what was coming. Following his hard-fought win, Medi had something interesting to say about Samre.
He plays like this every match. His life can be good. Money, girls, casino, whatever.
Yet another classic Medvedev moment. We thought we were going to see many more of those moments, but learner Tien had other ideas. Not nearly getting as much hype as his fellow teenager, Tien decided to take matters into his own hands. Having come through qualies and after surviving a 5-setter against Camilo Ugo Carabelli, Tien beat Medvedev at his own game, dragging the Russian neck-deep into long rallies. Before finishing him off with insane winners.
It doesn't get better than that.
When the rallies went beyond 4 shots, Tien was mostly coming out on top. And although he did blow a 2-sets-to-love lead and was down a break in the 5th set, Tien was able to dig deep into his reserves to edge Medvedev out in the 5th set tiebreak. If you're feeling generous, you can cut Medvedev some slack, given that he didn't have the ideal preparation for the Australian Open. He had just welcomed a baby and actually arrived late to Australia. But how on earth was Tien able to outgrind Medvedev, you might ask? Well, it all came down to some super smart and tactical point construction, frequently playing the backhand slice short to draw Medi from his comfort zone on the baseline in order to hit winners past him. Tien may not have the biggest weapons like some of the other next-gen prospects, but boy is his rally tolerance S tier. So now we see a trend, 4 next-gen guys taking down top 10 players and Tsitsipas. Guys, I think it's safe to say that the older guys have been surpassed. Tsitsipas said he feels like he's a better player today than he was in the past, but it still isn't enough. A few weeks back, Ruud said that the game had changed and had become a lot more physical. Seeing teenagers with huge weapons and complete skill sets that trouble these seasoned veterans isn't normal. But that's just one end of the spectrum. On the other end, we have old men still sticking it to Father Time. 38-year-old Gael Monfils started the year by becoming the oldest man since 1977 to win an ATP title, but let me tell you, he didn't stop at that. Fresh off the title win in Auckland, La Monf took it a step further last week by going toe-to-toe with players who were still learning how to tie their shoes when he was literally making his ATP debut. In the first round, he beat Pechi Perricard in 5 sets without facing a break point, casually flipping narratives like pancakes. Now, one would have expected Perricard to be the one not to face a break point. Monfils had raced to a 2-sets-to-love lead, and even held match points in the 3rd set, but Perricard fought his way back into the match, even going as far as ripping a page from La Monf's playbook. However, the veteran relied on his experience to take care of business in 5.
It's experience, ultimately, that holds sway.
Monfils then cruised through the 2nd round against Daniel Altmaier in straights, but the real threat came in the 3rd round against Taylor Fritz. See, Taylor had been in cruise control and had only dropped 8 games combined in his first 2 matches. Seeing Fritz's hardcourt performances from last year, many fans, including myself, had actually had him as a dark horse to the title. But La Monf was cooking something special. Monfils is an artist, and the tennis court is his canvas. Even Picasso would have been proud of the Frenchman's artistry on the court. Despite going down a set, Monfils was able to regroup and win in 4, and just look at what it meant to him.
The painter of so many beautiful pictures in this sport.
Monfils has a 9-1 record for the year and has now won 8 consecutive matches in 2025. On top of that, La Monf has now become the 2nd oldest man after Roger Federer to reach the Australian Open round of 16 since 1988, and the oldest to beat a top 5 player at the Australian Open. Basking in his proud dad moment, here's what Monfils had to say after the 3rd round win against Fritz.
I've done the job. I've done the job, so here we are in 2nd week of Australian Open.
La Monf, however, wasn't the only senior citizen beating kids for fun. A certain Novak Djokovic set his eyes on a 25th Grand Slam. As usual, Novak decided to play his way into form as he faced qualifiers in his first 2 matches. Facing Nishesh Basavaredi in the 1st round, Novak looked like he was up against a younger version of himself.
Oh, yes, sir.
And after taking the 1st set, it looked like we were in for some real drama because Djokovic was short of his usual standards. Basavaredi started cramping towards the end of the 2nd set, and his level dropped off after that, a pointer to his lack of experience at the top level. Novak fights back to win in 4 sets. In the end, it would be a successful coaching debut for Andy Murray. But take note, guys, Basavaredi is a player everyone should have on their radars because his skill set is pretty complete and I think his ceiling is pretty high. Novak took on another qualifier, Jaime Faria, in the 2nd round. As usual, Djokovic still looked too casual. He didn't resemble someone who had won the tournament 10 times. It's safe to say that at this point, taking a set off Novak at slams is the new normal. After losing the 1st set, Faria decided to throw caution to the wind, serving bombs, finding his targets with lots of consistency, and he was pulling the trigger at exactly the right time. He goes on to steal the 2nd set from Nole in a tiebreak. But Novak was done having fun, so he only gave out 5 games in the next 2 sets as he got the job done in 4. At this point, everyone starts talking about Novak's level not being good enough for tougher oppositions in Machac and Lehečka. Djokovic might have looked rough physically against Machac, but he reminded everyone for the umpteenth time that he has no problems raising his level when he needs to. The match was filled with insane rallies that had me on my feet, Djokovic applying the pressure and Machac defying body limits with endless splits. These guys were having way too much fun with the variety of stroke production, but game-wise, Djokovic completely shut down Machac and didn't give the Czech any momentum to build on as he ran riot with a straight sets victory. Who said Machac was going to be a problem for Novak again? Take a look at the rally breakdown right here. Anyway, just to double check, excuse the pun, Novak confirmed his level with a repeat straight sets masterclass against yet another Czech, beating Lehečka in the 4th round and keeping the vibes strong and hopes high for yet another AO crown. He also extended his quarterfinal record at slams. However, the GOAT was in no mood for an on-court interview post-match because the disrespect had gone too far.
Novak, he's overrated. Novak's a has-been. Novak, kick him out.
Call it whatever type of humor you would, but that was out of line. Djokovic then called for an apology from Tony James and Channel 9. Still not done with the old guard, another member of the Old Boys Club made his mark by reminding everyone he was the 5-set king. Although Nishikori only got to win 1 match, he did so in style, saving 2 match points in only his 3rd Grand Slam appearance since 2021. And if you're wondering where he got all that extra juice from, well, here you have your answer.
What do you eat before matches and how do you fuel during them to kind of keep your energy levels up?
I eat a lot of sushi.
For the Americans, let's just say week 1 of the Australian Open was a bit of a mixed bag. On the one hand, we had Lerner Tien and Alex Michelsen plotting a next-gen takeover with impressive wins over top players to reach the 2nd week. It's hard to say who impressed me more between the 2 Southern California boys.
Well, strong work from the young American.
Michelsen has been brilliant, and Tien has also been impressive. Going off some of the comments I've seen, I might have to consider doing a deep dive on Tien. Elsewhere, it was Shelton reminding everyone that he was made for the big stage. From navigating a tricky opponent in Nakashima in the 1st round to catching fire against Musetti in the 3rd, Shelton has been super on another level. The competitor mindset comes naturally. But more importantly, Ben is getting a lot smarter at point construction and pace variation. He also had the added motivation of not losing 3 times in a row to Musetti, though.
If someone beats you 3 times in a row, they're your daddy. So I was fighting to not let that happen today.
But while it was the first time that 3 or more American men aged 23 and under reached the 2nd week of a Grand Slam since the 1993 US Open class of Courier, Chang, Adams, and Sampras, the more seasoned players were given a reality check. Francis Tiafoe was underwhelming, to say the least. We knew about Marijan's upset potential in the 2nd round due to his obvious hyper-aggressive style, but I was pulling for Tiafoe. Marijan was an eye-opening 10 for 10 for breakpoints saved in the 4th set before levitating in the 5th.
Big match, Marijan.
Tiafoe's physical conditioning is increasingly becoming questionable in 5-set matches. Taking a look at the other guys though, Jenson Brooksby went MIA against Fritz in the 1st round, while Seb Korda left a lot to be desired, falling to Alexander Vukic in the 2nd. Korda didn't seem like he was fully committing to every serve at times due to a nagging ab issue. And despite his physical struggles, Riley Opelka couldn't resist his serve-bot demons. 78 aces in only 2 matches. For someone who's missed much of the last 3 years due to hip and wrist injuries, Riley has had a great start to the year. I can't wait to see a 100% healthy Opelka play tennis this season. He might as well become an early candidate for the Comeback Player of the Year award. Fritz might have fallen to a resurgent Gael Monfils, but we have Tommy Paul flying the American flag. It's going to be a new career high and top 10 debut for Paul. Tommy is 2-0 against Zverev in their head-to-head, and both players are up against each other in the quarterfinal. It's gonna be an interesting matchup, but we aren't here for just the Americans, are we? Shout out to the Aussies for making their mark in their home tournament. From Adam Walton narrowly losing to Quinton Alice in a 5-set thriller, and Lee Tu giving Lehechka a run for his money, to Chris O'Connell pushing Tommy Paul to 5 sets, and Tristan Schoolkate doing the impossible, taking a set off Jannik Sinner. No one had managed to do that since October. But the vibes were off for Nick Kyrgios, who didn't exactly have the return he would have loved, losing to Jacob Fernley in the first round. Considering where this match seemed to be heading, it was a nice fight back from Kyrgios to get a set point in the third, but ultimately, the 39-game serving contest with Perricard didn't really test him physically, and it was clear as day that Nick wasn't ready for Fernley. Kyrgios doesn't see himself playing at the AO again.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I can't really see myself probably playing singles again here.
Nick's friend Kokkinakis also struggled physically, and both players couldn't even make it in doubles. Kokkinakis' defeat to Draper has got to hurt because he literally did serve for the match in the 4th set, and it just feels like yet another loss from a winning position. Moving on to the other Aussies, Popyrin also didn't get the results he would have hoped for, and despite seeing some impressive wins from Jordan Thompson, James McCabe, James Duckworth, and Alexander Vukic, there was absolutely no doubt that Alex de Minaur was going to be their best hope for winning big. De Minaur entered into the tournament for the first time as a top 10 player, and he'll be hoping for a deep run at the very least. He took care of business in straights against a very dangerous opponent in Botic van de Zandschulp in the first round, but Botic left his mark with a shot of the tournament contender. And look how Botic casually walked it off like it was just another day at the office. However, Sonego wasn't about to let Botic have the award to himself, so he matched Botic's efforts with an absurd tweener of his own. But if you're wondering why we haven't talked about Alcaraz yet, it's because Carlitos hit the cruise control button and only dropped 12 games in his first 2 matches. Relatively untested in those first 2 contests, Alcaraz was up against Nuno Borges in the 3rd round. While Borges was brilliant for a set and a half, Alcaraz didn't really have to leave second gear. Alcaraz is a man on a mission. He's looking to become the youngest player to win all 4 Grand Slams. The Australian Open is the only missing piece of silverware, and Carlitos wants that kangaroo tattoo so badly, but now he's gonna have to go through Novak. But how ridiculous is it that Djokovic and Murray have played against both Ferrero and Alcaraz? Initially, we all thought that the Draper-Alcaraz match was going to be yet another popcorn match, but with Draper spending over 12.5 hours on the court entering into the match against a fresh Alcaraz, there was absolutely no chance the Brit was going to be able to trouble the Spaniard. What can we say about Draper? I recently did a deep dive on him, which you should totally check out if you haven't already. It looks to me like there's been a lot of improvement in Draper's endurance and physicality already. I don't know about you, but I couldn't have imagined Draper playing 3 back-to-back 5-setters this time last year. Draper became just the 4th player in Open-era history to win the first 3 rounds at a slam after being down 2-1. That being said, Draper would have loved to be a little more clinical against his opponents. His 88 unforced errors against Navone in the first round didn't do him any favors, and he sometimes dug himself a hole in matches he could have closed out a lot earlier. Draper blamed his nagging hip injury for his retirement against Alcaraz, but it's obvious physical exhaustion was the trigger. Touching base on some of the other guys from last week, we witnessed a 12th retirement from Grigor Dimitrov. Apart from retiring in back-to-back tournaments, Grigor has also been forced to retire at his last 3 slams. At this point, it's looking like the retirement slam might just be a thing as he's struggling with his hips still. Really, you have to feel bad for Dimitrov. I just wonder how much more his body can take. The lucky loser spot ended up being a golden opportunity for Francesco Passaro, who is now set for a top 100 debut. Who else have we got? We witnessed more disappointments from the Canadians. Denis Shapovalov managed to whip up tournament records for double faults. Like his compatriot Denis, Felix Auger-Aliassime also lost in the 2nd round. 3 of Felix's last 5 Australian Open losses have now come from 2 sets to love up. And at this point, I'm so hung up on what Felix needs to do to find consistency. He just won the title in Adelaide. That should have given him some momentum and more confidence, or am I missing something? It's okay though, because Felix lost to a player whose side quest was to come from 2 sets down to win a match. Davidovich Fokina was such a menace, he didn't even remember saving match points.
You also had to save 2 match points.
That's it? I didn't remember that.
Meanwhile, Hurkacz failed to turn up. Hubie still hasn't been at his best since that injury at Wimbledon. However, the injury concerns didn't seem to be a problem for Zverev. We all had concerns about Zverev's injury, but he ended up doing just okay with straight sets wins in all 3 of his early round matches and a 4-set win over Humbert in the 4th round. Zverev is still the only guy among those 25 to 30-year-olds with the best chance to win a slam, I suppose. Shout out to Holger Rune for coming out on top against Berrettini for the 3rd time in a row. We witnessed vintage shot making. Berrettini held set points in both the 1st and 4th sets and had his chances, but a combination of elite defensive work and all-out attack off the backhand proved to be the moneymaker for Rune, and it looks like he may be ready to prove many people wrong. The 4-set loss will sting for a while for Berrettini and the Italian fans. However, the Italians would have been consoled with crispy clean performances from Sinner. The defending champion has been dialed in from the jump, only dropping a set against an inspired Tristan Schoolkate. Jarry put up a great fight against Sinner in the 1st round, but he fell just short in the 2 tiebreaks before fading off in the 3rd set. Despite his issues off the court, Sinner has continued to remain cool, calm, and collected. We now know that Jannik and Cahill will part ways after this season. With that in mind, they'll be hoping to make this year even more special. I didn't think it was possible, but the WTA went fully unhinged and the women outdid themselves yet again last week. We witnessed peak tennis drama and the vibes were immaculate. And although high-profile withdrawals from Krejcikova, Vondrushova, Anna Kalinskaya, and a few other women threatened to spoil the party, we ended up getting a treat nonetheless. Sabalenka's title defense got off to a great start. Facing Sloane Stephens, a player who hadn't won a match since Wimbledon and was on a 9-match losing streak, Sabalenka never looked to be bothered one bit. After dominating Sloane, Sabalenka had enough time to show us her goofy side. Of course, Sabalenka was having fun, but her physio was probably second-guessing his life choices just a bit. Somebody save this man. After beating her next 2 opponents in Buzas and Clara Tauson, Arena took her winning streak to 17 consecutive matches and 21 consecutive sets. Oh, she absolutely demolished a helpless Mira Andreeva in the 4th round, so that makes it 18 consecutive matches and 23 sets. Excuse me. Sabalenka is truly unstoppable. But Iga Świątek is lurking. She's been serving bagels and breadsticks as she looks to reclaim the top spot from Sabalenka. Perhaps the most impressive of all her early round wins came against Emma Raducanu in the 3rd round. Iga was incredibly aggressive, yet accurate. Simply put, Emma had no breathing room. Iga isn't messing around this time, and so was Rybakina until she ran into Madison Keys. Rybakina had been blitzing past opponents as she surpassed 50 match wins at the Grand Slam level. However, Rybakina had some injury concerns and lost in the 4th round to Madison Keys. Unfortunately for Naomi Osaka, it's the same story all over again. After getting her revenge against Caroline Garcia and Muchova, Naomi was forced to retire against Belinda Bencic in the 3rd round due to a nagging injury. That's 3 straight tournaments now where she's retired mid-match, in Beijing, Auckland, and now the Australian Open. It goes without saying that while Naomi has that elite level still in her, her physical struggles might be the biggest problem for her this season. Elsewhere, chaos was brewing with insane things happening. Magdalena Frech and Anna Blinkova decided to play a game of hide-and-seek instead on the court, while Alina Svitolina was replicating her husband's efforts on the same court by beating world number 4 Jasmine Paolini. Alina now has over a century of Grand Slam wins to her name. But how can we forget Eva Lise, the first women's singles lucky loser to reach the 4th round at the Australian Open since the event moved to Melbourne Park in 1988. Eva Lise lost in the last round of qualifying. Her bags were packed, and she had actually already booked her flight back to Germany.
We actually changed the flight date to tomorrow.
However, she decided to hang around in the hopes of someone withdrawing. It goes without saying that you don't always know when your breakthrough is right around the corner in tennis. For some people, it may come with a stroke of luck, a favorable draw, or something random. The most important thing would be to seize the moment and make the most of it. The story was different with the American women, though. Coco Gauff was flying high, only dropping a set en route to the quarterfinal, while Madison Keys found herself in the unenviable position of taking down 2 of her compatriots to reach the 4th round. One of those compatriots was Danielle Collins. Say what you will about Collins, but one thing you can't call her is a pushover.
The people that don't like you and the people that hate you, they actually pay your bills. Every person that's bought a ticket to come out here and heckle me, it's all going towards the Danielle Collins Fund.
It's one thing to cheer for a player, but it's another thing to be rude to the opposition or greet every mistake they make with jeers. Djokovic said he loved Collins' response.
I loved her response. I loved it. Everything she said.
And part of that has to do with standing up for yourself. Hate it or love it, strong personalities are good for the sport. Not everyone can be ice cool like Jannik Sinner or always maintain a smile like Alcaraz, both of which are admirable qualities. Some people feel they do better when they have 0 Fs to give. Zheng Qinwen got upset by Laura Siegemund in the 2nd round. However, Zheng made it clear that she wasn't going to be all smiling at you after a defeat.
I always give a handshake to my opponent because I feel that's the basic respect. But not always I give a handshake with a smiley face.
Is it bad sportsmanship, or should we keep expecting every player to fit into a certain mold? Honestly, I'm eager to know your thoughts. After the dust settled on Medvedev's actions, he was hit with a massive fine of $76,000, which is about 61% of the prize money he earned at the event. $10K for hitting the camera with his racket, and $66K for his behavior during his match against Teen and not attending press. Safe to say, Medi will be looking to put all of it behind him. Shout out to the 2024 Comeback Player of the Year Paula Badosa for yet another incredible campaign at a Grand Slam. Badosa is almost guaranteed to re-enter the top 10 after reaching the quarterfinal in Melbourne. Oh, and I should also mention that Anastasia Pavlyuchenkova is low-key the strongest player ever to have never been a top 10 player. How has she won a dozen WTA titles, reached a Grand Slam final, and now made 9 Grand Slam quarterfinals without ever entering into the top 10? Let me know if you have the answers. Pavlyuchenkova's win over Vekic was super impressive. Guys, last week in tennis was pure cinema, and we witnessed pure entertainment on and off the court. You can keep up with all the action here on Courtside Tennis, and if you missed out on the Joao Fonseca deep dive, be sure to check it out. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on whether he's the future of tennis or not.